Hey guys, welcome back. As promised, this is part 2 of my animal and nature decks, and this is the Oracle portion. If you want to see the tarot ones, they have already been shared and I'll link them above now. Just in case you didn't catch the beginning of that video, really quickly I'll add that I've chosen to add the element of nature because there are some decks that incorporate other things into their visuals, into their imagery, such as trees and the earth and various other items that we would recognise in nature, but there's no human element to them. I do have nature decks that still feel very earthy and nature-centric that do have humans in, but I've kind of drawn the line there to help with the selection that I'm showing, and because the largest portion of my collection is animal and nature based, it means that I can add those other ones into a different video. We have to start this off with the one that started it all. Let's not bore you, but for those who are new and this is the first time that you're ever meeting me, hearing me, getting to know anything, I grew up with this deck. My mum had the original copy and she really wove working with animals and their energy and just my passion for knowing them, protecting them, engaging with them, conservation, all of those things. It was really brought into my childhood from the womb, people. From the womb. And this deck has therefore been the hugest part of my heart in terms of decks and working, and has been an ongoing channel for me to engage with animals that maybe I don't necessarily see, or to learn how to work with animal energy in the way that I choose to do it. And of course that's going to be unique to all of us. I do have a video discussing some of the ways that you can work with animal energy, but I feel like there's so much more I have to say about that. This deck, one of the things to note, aside from the fact that it's freaking awesome, but I'm superbly biased at this stage, I'm not going to lie. Despite its glossy cardstock, despite its very flashy backing, I have nothing bad to say about this deck. Nada. So there's my bias. One of the things to note about this deck is that the compilation of animals and the medicine shared is interwoven with aspects of Native American teachings. Now, it's important to note, and they do say this in the book straight away, that these things vary from tribe to tribe. Some may not even work with animals in this capacity, and so this isn't a representation of any one thing, and it's not the only way to work with them. But this is very much a part of these earthly teachings that are being shared with us. And so that is the type of energy and the type of information that you're going to get from this deck, which has the best guidebook ever. It's huge. And they do reversals, but the energy isn't just positive for upright and negative for reverse, which is not for me at all. It has much more depth to it to that. It makes a lot more sense to me psychologically in terms of working with shadow and light and the challenges and all of those things. I love Jamie Sams in particular. I love the fact that this deck is created by someone who is of Native American heritage, and that is why this deck has encompassed a lot of this. They mention various elders from various tribes that they had spoken with, and it is just such a heartfelt creation. One of the things that people have said they found difficult when coming to learn animal medicine is having no keywords on the deck. Other people really enjoy it, so it's going to be down to you to decide, but there's no keywords on this. They have these really lovely dreamcatcher type feel. There's no rhyme or reason from what I can understand as to what's chosen below other than artistic flavour. And you can see here that I'm very fortunate after searching to find the mini edition of this, which is out of print and highly impossible to find. If you find it, it's usually ridiculously priced. I'm sorry, but even for the deck of my dreams, I was never going to pay that sort of amount for it. I got lucky, but there was lots of footwork and time and patience put into that. And you can see this one just has the little blurbs at the bottom. This one is the original amount of animals, which I believe to be 44. The large version originally had 44. Then you have the revised, which is this one, which has 52 animals. And so I do use both of them because some of the animals that I work with more commonly and are a large part of my practice aren't included in the first copy. One other thing I would say is people are always saying how ugly this deck is, and as I'm biased, I appreciate I'm probably seeing it through rose-tinted glasses, but if you come away from the borders and things like that, not everyone's a spider fan like me, I'll get you a different picture, and you look at the detailing on these pictures, they're beautiful. The very realistic nature of them, it really is something that I appreciate. So I get it that they're interesting everywhere else, but you have to hand it to the artist. They can draw animals. Next, I have the Wild Unknown Animals Spirit deck. My copy's the indie, but you can now get it mass produced, and I've seen the mass produced copies of this deck. They are sumptuous. They're still really, really well made. Really beautifully done. If you can get one where the borders aren't totally off, which seems to be an issue that 𝗺_𝗲𝗄 has occasionally, then yeah, lovely. It does come with a book. It's much more concise, but it still gives you a lovely rounded view of the energy that's being focused in on for the animal. And what 𝗵𝗀 does is gives you an imbalance, an out of balance, and a how to help, restore the balance for these, which is a nice addition. There's heavy usage of the elements, which you can see. I'll have to be honest, over time I have stopped working with the elements of this deck. Not because I don't agree with the elements that she's chosen, but because it's just not something that always feels necessary. One time I might feel really drawn to it and another time I don't. There's no hard and fast rule, but as a general overview, it's not something that I feel I require for my animal decks. Because the guidebook is smaller, there's not necessarily so much about the background of the animal, the nature and environment as a whole. These are all things that I love to study, and so they're not necessary in an animal deck. If someone just wants to work with animals and just wants one deck and would like it to be simple and easy to take in and doesn't want to go away and study them for hours and watch loads of geographic programs and all of that jazz, that's fine, and this deck would then do that really well. The Spirit Edition comes away from everyday animals, and we have these mystical things. We've got the sea serpent. We've actually got eggs that mean different things. There's a golden egg, there's a black egg, there's a cosmic egg. I think I'm remembering them right. It's got the lines. They're very intentional. They draw you in. It's got the colours. You can see in the stingray all of the chakras are represented here. It's very, very choicefully done. There's playful colours and they're everywhere in the dolphin, and it suggests that fluid movement. So I feel like it's very easy, again, to read this imagery and go from there with it if you really want to. It's a lovely addition, finally, really is what I can say, to have to the Wild Unknown Tarot deck, which of course I love, adore, and it's really nice to have this. Because my medicine cards are my babies, this doesn't get used as much, but no other animal oracle gets used as much as that one. But it's got a unicorn in it, you guys. Hell yes. I love this card. It stalks me in this deck. It's got a really interesting selection of animals. There's quite the crossover between this and the medicine cards, and what I found is they more often than not seem to sing the same tune in the energy, but obviously it's much more concise in this, so that was interesting. This is a very well-known card. Look at that dragon eye. No complaints about this deck. As I say, if you need the keywords, it's going to be another one that's not for you. Other than that, it has the same backing as the second indie edition of The Wild Unknown, or both of the mass markets, but you can see this is more of a silvery lighter colour, so you can differentiate between the two. This is another one whose artist sets my soul on fire. This is the Drude Animal Oracle, and it is artwork by the very loved 𝗵𝘀𝗯𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 to none. I love this. I haven't had this deck for anywhere near as long. A friend gifted it to me because they knew that I was obsessed. I really wanted it. I had the Druid plant oracles. I really wanted to learn more about Druidry as a whole. I really enjoy the fact that this has dragons in it. It has elemental dragons, earth, fire, water, air. I mean, I'm there for that. If you're not, it doesn't feel like you're going to lose anything from taking those cards out of the deck, but if you are there for some of that ancient magical shit, then these are in there for you. One of the things that 𝗵𝘂𝗯𝘀𝗀 does is he adds symbols and inclusions which, whilst they might not be obvious and you might still need to study or learn about them, they hint at aspects of the message. The flowers will be chosen specifically. It just is, all of those little details are absolutely fabulous, and you can see that I do tend to just chuck cards together and not worry about whether they're upright. The dragons are adorable. Look at this earth dragon's holdings. Look at all of those goodies. And you can see the crane. So here we've got the moon, all of those added layers of energy. The book is again fabulous. I have the large copy of the book. This is mass produced, but it comes with 2 editions. You can get one that is the size of the cards and has a little white book, which really isn't little and still has a great amount of information on the animal and on the energy. I think what isn't in that's in the larger copy, which comes in a much bigger box with a hardback book, is the myth or story or connection that is also included with these animals, and that's something that I was really interested in and that I need to carve out some more space to finish reading. So all of the animals aside from dragons are one that I can easily come across because of where I live. The cardstock is huge. However, I can, with my tiny hands, still shuffle it upright overhand. I don't rifle shuffle, so I can't speak to that. But because the artwork is so detailed, I must say that I really enjoy having it in this larger size. It's not too thick. It's not too glossy. You know, Goldilocks would be chuffed. And it's definitely another deck that feels like there's so much to teach you about those particular animals that, for me, adds that extra flavour of not just knowing the energy that you can work with, but more about their environment or their myth or whatever it is that adds to this internal dictionary that I've built over time. The backs are very simple, and you can see my only thing that I don't love is they show my oily fingers, but they do match with the Druidcraft tarot and also the Druid plant. They're just all 3 different colours. Beasts of Albion feels like it's a good follow-up from the previous deck, and the previous deck was mass-produced, I would like to add. This one is actually out of print. I'm pretty sure it's very hard to get hold of. This is not one that I see around a lot at all, but the reason that I feel it's a very good follow-up is because this is also animals that I would be very familiar with. This is based on Britain and various tradition and myth and legend, and also incorporates natural history. So again, it's ticking all of those boxes for me, but in a very different capacity and a very different voice than the Druid Animal. I love the backgrounds. People have said it's reminded them of several things. It reminds me of like the Harry Potter scarves and that kind of Argyle stuff. One of the things that this deck does is it has it split into 3 different groups. And honestly, I've done a video of this deck and I still have so much to learn about it. I use it and I work with the animal medicine in the same way that I do with all of the other decks. But what I am still trying to incorporate is the 3 elements and how they basically move up a spiral, and they have all of these additional layers to them. So we've got the reds, which is quite browny in this one, but you can see. We've got the blue and we've got the green. And there's so much meaning and structure that can be encompassed in this deck that it's really a learning experience on its own, which these are things that I am more and more dropping into as I add more depth into the collection that I already own. Whilst I've worked with them in my own way, the study of the books and maybe those extra structural things, as I say, they're still coming into play. This has jewellery elements, which is something I'm seeing more in some of the newer animal decks, and not something that I am mega a fan of, but in this one I really enjoy it. Like, the lion looks really regal. The mouse kind of looks like a tiny pirate. It's cute. It doesn't distract me from what I'm seeing at all. And again, these backgrounds, they don't distract or detract from the imagery, I don't find, but I can appreciate that some others might. Of course, you're watching this and thinking, well, if I can't get the deck anyway, but it is a cherished part of my collection and I wanted to show it. It does have a dragon and it has a unicorn. So there are those more mythical aspects. But of course, that is something that is very commonly seen in the myth of Britain and the various legends that have been shared over time. So it makes a lot of sense that they're both included in the deck. There's not really much else I can add to this at this time other than to say that I really enjoy it. I'm sorry that you probably can't get it, but I wanted to show you it. And of course, the backs. Now the backs are really quite lovely and surprise me in terms of the style choice in comparison to the front. You have noticed by now I'm not really put off by more gaudy or random art styles. Next, if you're looking for something that's going to add a big dose of colour into your work, if you enjoy colourful cards and things that are maybe more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, then this Animalkin Oracle is for you. And the good news is that whilst my edition is the 3rd edition of the indie, it is now mass produced, and the mass produced version looks really beautiful, and I hear great things about the cardstock. One of the things that is great about this deck is that it's huge. It's got a really big selection of cards, and there's also a really interesting array of animals. There's animals that I didn't have in some of my other ones. I didn't have a wagtail. I love that there's more specific breeds in this and that it branches out in that capacity, so I'm really grateful for that. And I enjoy the mandala edging and all of the little additions that have been created. So you can see here that we've got the crystals and we've got the number, which really isn't intrusive at all. I'm not sure how different it is in the mass And you can see in the borders here that there's the elemental symbols. It is another deck that uses elements, but it's not intrusive. It's not necessary. You can still work without it, or you can add it in. And Sarah has a really, really lovely way of engaging with the animals that is all of the things that I like. There's a bit of more of the spiritual aspect to their energy, that divinatory message, and then there's some of their environment and their behaviours. And another bonus for people who are newer to animal decks or that are looking for that keyword to bounce off of, you can see that you are provided one. So cow is nourishment. And the book again is, as I've said, the content's really good. This for me is, whilst I love the medicine cards, I'm not going to lie, I often encourage people to get them as long as I think it's going to float their boat, of course. But when people are really new to animal medicine and I have these discussions with them, because this is now mass market as well, this is certainly one that I encourage people to consider. Because for me, it's from someone who works with animal medicine genuinely. This one feels like it offers that whole package, and that it would hold someone in their exploration of working with animals in a really lovely way. And of course, you don't have to use the keyword if you don't want to. For me, if I'm pulling the snake and their sort of transmutation aspect of it isn't the first thing that's coming to me, or isn't the bit that I'm connecting into that day, there's nothing that says I have to use the keyword. It just is that bouncing point, that signpost, maybe that trigger for your brain while you're learning, or even if you're like me and you're just having a fuzzy day. Because I said there's some animals that I wasn't as familiar with, it's brought more into my day-to-day workings, because whilst predominantly I work with animals that I come into contact with, I do a lot of study about anything and everything. I want to know all there is to know. I am a greedy animal knowledge person, and this has really, really added to that. And for me, it's up the ante, especially now that it's a mass-produced. This is the thing which to compare all other animal decks that are coming out, which is a big deal because, as I say, for me to love another deck this much, as well as the medicine cards, that's kind of impressive. And I will show you the backs, but of course they're different on every single edition. What the creator does is she chooses one of the cards, and their border, their mandala colours and all of that is used on the back. This is the wolf edition, the 3rd edition, and I believe that the mass produced is the beetle, and so the backs are more of those sort of emerald hues and midnight blues. Now for the Animal Allies Oracle, and this is very new to my collection. It is an indie deck, but it is still available as far as I'm aware. We returned back to one that doesn't have keywords. This has a really, really cute art style, and I love the doodly additions. You can see the badger did actually have a crown, but it's not this kind of garish over the top thing. It doesn't make me feel like they've been dressed up by someone. And I really like the colours. It is so colourful, whilst the borders pull it all together really beautifully. One of the things, here it is, I love the timing. One of the things that really had left me loving this deck is there's a few animals I've been looking for in decks for a long time. One of them was 𝗫𝗏. If you don't know already, I have a beautiful a giant African land 𝗫𝗏. I have had more 𝗫𝗏s in the past, and I have a soft spot for them. There is a 𝗫𝗏 in I think it's the 10 of Wands in the Animal Totem Tarot, but I didn't have any in my Oracle decks. And whilst I don't need the image to work with it, it is nice. I'm not a collector of any deck and every deck. That's not how it is. I don't want all of the animal decks, although I joke I do. There are certainly ones out there that still call to me, but because I have such a nice array, I'm very, very picky now as to what comes into my collection. Very picky. And I don't mind duplications of animals if the artwork is really going to speak to me, because it gives me a different visual. But also, to me, my oracle decks, they're not just an extension of how I work with messages or with animals, but they're also like an art collection to me. I really love what I've heard about the creator. I think Animal Allies was a lovely name, the same as Animal Kin, that they've chosen a way to refer to working with animals that is not taken from a specific culture that's not theirs, that has a really unique, nice connection and ring to it. It doesn't come with a book, it comes with a fold out, which still has a fabulous amount of information in it, and it's either like keywords or very short sentences within that information to give you something to bounce from. But she also mentions several things that have been a big part of my animal journey. She mentions the medicine cards. She mentions Ted Andrews and his books such as Animal Speak, which, as you know, have all been big parts in my path on working with animals as I've gotten older. So of course I am very, very thankful to have her creation and to use it and to enjoy it and to learn a little bit more about her thoughts on the cards. I've read probably about half of them by now, and as I say, there's not too much to read. And they have these lovely backs which feels sort of reminiscent of tarot fauna. Very pleasing to the eye. These last two decks are the ones that fall more into the nature aspect, where animal medicine is certainly a part of them, but it's not the only aspect within them, and they're not therefore branded as animal decks. This is the Shaman Wisdom cards, and this is a deck that I've had since I was really young as well. I didn't use it as much as my medicine cards, but I still have a really big love for it. And you can see that it goes through the moons, so you have the astrological connections there. We have plants and trees, there's crystals, and there's animals. They're broken down into their various groupings, briefly discussed as a whole, and then the book discusses them, and it does it from a first person basis, and it's really nice and affirmative. It's got a lovely selection of information, but the fact that you're saying it or reading it in I am statements really feels like it brings the message home in quite a powerful way. I confess that this is a deck that, whilst I'm very, very familiar with it, there are a few cards in here that I still haven't remembered all of the information. But because the book's so accessible and enjoyable, I just go and I read it. I don't feel bad about doing that. That's what the books are there for. I don't have the best memory ever anymore, although I wish I did. And so every now and then I have to come back to the book, but it's not a massive piece of information, but it's certainly enough. They are specific enough to each card that each card has its own unique voice and message. They're not affirmation in that way that any card could, they mean everything and anything. That's not really my kind of deck anyway. But at the same time, there's space to explore what the energy is further, especially if you know. So if you know Aspen, then you don't need to go to the book. Again, you're not confined by that, but certainly I enjoy the book's insights on them. This is still available. It's a mass market deck. I don't really know if it's the same card stock because as I say, I've had this one for years, but I would imagine it is. And I will show you the backs, which are not reversible, but they have this lovely dream catcher, and you can see it's like a compass. And finally, last but not least, which I think the Wooden Tarot was the last on my other video. That is nothing against these decks, I love them. This is the Wooden Tarot's little companion. This is the Earthbound Oracle. They also have a Lenormand that's in this style as well, but I don't have that. You can see very quick off the bat that this has got animal energy in it. Sometimes it definitely feels like it's drawing upon that for me. So for here we have a bear sleeping, so there's that state of hibernation or torpor for them, and that adds to that layer of that message. You've got things such as the moon and the sun, the 4 elements in here as well. There we go, so they're lovely additions. And it is, as it says in the name, it's the Earthbound Oracle. There might be the occasional human element to it, but otherwise it is just very earthy. I'm really vibing off of it, and because it's so simple with its one keyword, it makes it so versatile and so usable with other decks. I will use this and another animal deck and maybe a tarot or two. I do love to mix my decks quite a lot and get lots of cards out, and this one, it has a lot to add. If I read with it on its own, I tend to pull a minimum of 3 cards. Of course you can pull 1 card and really just channel that energy and see what you project onto it from your psyche, but just it's a personal preference that over time, especially with a few of them like this one that says message, I feel like I want another 2 cards minimum to kind of add to that layer of what's going on. And you can see here that things are very consciously chosen again. So on toxic, we've got toxic plants, toxic mushrooms. It all very much makes sense. Visually it's gorgeous. I say gorgeous and beautiful far too often, but clearly I need a thesaurus. It's nice to have with the Wooden Tarot, but as I say, I use it with a lot of other decks as well. And finally, look at the backing. The creator just knows how to do the back of cards totally. And there you have it, guys. That is my animal and nature deck collection as it stands right now. I have had other ones and they have been passed on, gifted to people, traded, whatever, because they just didn't vibe with me. I certainly would never say that I'm not going to get any more animal decks, because that would be a big fat lie. But as I say, very, very picky now. The only thing that comes to mind at this moment that's significantly in my radar is the Brady Tarot, because that gives me a lot of the vibes that I look for and also enjoy in an animal tarot deck. I'm not so sure about any other animal oracles at the moment. I'm possibly forgetting something, but I have such a beautiful array of decks to work with already, so many resources and various visuals to jump into, that I certainly am not in need of any further. I'd love to hear what you thought of these videos. You know, if you want to tell me about an animal deck that you're enjoying that wasn't here, or whatever you have to say. As always, I really encourage you guys to get involved in the comments, because I will always try and get back to the comments, and it's nice to create space for further discussion and exploration together, rather than you just simply having to listen to me all the time. Thank you for listening, and other than that, I'll catch you guys all again soon.